"You're just a burden, Mom. Some people only deserve crumbs." Those words sliced through me sharper than any knife. I could still hear my son's voice echoing through the speakerphone as he smiled at his wife's mother and wired her $100,000 right in front of me on my 65th birthday. For me, he had a $10 gift card tucked inside a cheap envelope. $10. After 40 years of raising him alone, skipping vacations, driving the same rusted sedan, and working extra shifts so he could go to medical school, my worth was reduced to a plastic card. I remember staring at that tiny card like it was a mirror, showing me every sacrifice I had made, every piece of myself I had traded away for his future. And at that moment, I realized something. It wasn't just my son who had forgotten my value. It was me. Have you ever given everything to someone only to realize they never saw you at all? If you have, stay with me. Maybe my story will sound a little like yours. My name is Maggie Turner, a retired city worker from the suburbs of Chicago. I raised my son, Dr. Andrew Turner, all on my own. He's a brilliant neurosurgeon now, married into a wealthy Connecticut family, the Bennetts. His wife, Olivia, and her mother, Catherine, belong to a world I was never invited into. But on that birthday, when Drew handed me that gift card and told me to update my look, something inside me shattered, and something else woke up. That night, I promised myself this would be the last time anyone, especially my own son, made me feel small. I used to think love meant sacrifice, that if you gave enough, worked hard enough, loved deeply enough, the universe would reward you somehow, maybe not with riches or fame, but with gratitude, with tenderness, with someone looking you in the eye and saying, "You mattered." That's what I believed for most of my life. My name is Maggie Turner, and for 40 years, I built my entire world around my son, Andrew. Everyone called him Drew, but to me he was always just my boy, the one I held in my arms when his father walked out and never came back, the one I promised I would never fail, even if it meant failing myself. We lived in a small, 2-bedroom house in Oak Park, just outside Chicago. It wasn't much, but it was ours. I remember painting the walls light blue because Drew said it made him feel calm. The roof leaked every spring, the furnace groaned through the winters, and the washing machine needed a good kick before it started, but I kept it running, because that house was the only place where I could make the world feel safe for him. When Drew was little, he loved looking at the stars. We'd sit on the back steps with a blanket wrapped around us, and he'd ask about every single one. I told him stories about astronauts and adventures, and he'd laugh, promising that one day he'd buy me a telescope so I could see the stars up close. I believed him. Back then, I worked as an administrative assistant for the city. The pay wasn't great, but it was steady, and I had health insurance. I'd wake up at 5, make breakfast, pack his lunch, drop him off at school, and then spend the rest of the day answering phones and typing reports. When I came home, I'd cook dinner, help him with homework, and fall asleep to the sound of his steady breathing. Every paycheck had a purpose: tuition, books, summer camp. One time I skipped paying my own electric bill just so he could go on a science trip to the planetarium. I told him the power company made a mistake when the lights went out for a night. He believed me then too. Drew was smart, so smart that teachers said he could be anything he wanted. I wanted that for him more than I wanted anything for myself. Every promotion I turned down, every new coat I didn't buy, every trip I refused to take with friends, it was all for his future. Someday, I used to tell myself, he'll understand. When Drew got accepted into medical school in Boston, I cried for 2 days straight, not out of sadness, but pride. He hugged me tight, promised to call every day. "You'll be proud of me, Mom," he said. "You already make me proud," I whispered back. But things started changing around then. His phone calls got shorter. Sometimes he wouldn't pick up at all. When he came home for holidays, his hugs felt different, polite, brief, like the way you'd hug a distant relative. He'd look at the neighborhood and shake his head. "You still live here?" he once asked, like he couldn't believe it. I laughed it off. "It's home," I said. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You could do better if you wanted to." What he didn't understand was that I didn't need better. Everything I needed was standing in front of me. After medical school, Drew moved to New York for his residency. I sent him money whenever he said he was short. Just until payday, he'd promise. I'd take a bus across town to deposit cash into his account. He never asked how I managed, and I never told him that sometimes it meant eating soup for dinner 4 nights a week. Then he met Olivia. She came from the kind of family you only read about in magazines: old money, country clubs, summers in Martha's Vineyard. I saw a photo of her once on social media, standing beside her mother, Catherine Bennett. Both of them were beautiful, polished, the kind of women who didn't need to check price tags. When Drew told me he was getting married, I was thrilled. "You'll love her, Mom," he said. "She's elegant." Elegant. That word lingered in my mind. I didn't know what it meant to be elegant. My dresses came from discount racks, my shoes from last season's sales. But I told myself it didn't matter. As long as he was happy, I would learn to fit in. The first time I met Olivia was at a restaurant in downtown Chicago. She smiled politely, the way you smile at a waiter. "It's so nice to finally meet you," she said. Her perfume was expensive, her tone practiced. I tried to keep up with the conversation, but every topic circled around people I didn't know and places I'd never been. Halfway through dinner, she glanced at my sweater. "That color looks comfortable," she said, then took a sip of her wine. Drew laughed softly, as if to lighten the mood. "Moms never cared much for fashion." End quote. I laughed too, pretending not to notice the sting in my chest. After they got married, the calls stopped altogether. Months passed without a word. I told myself he was busy saving lives, that he'd reach out when things calmed down. I sent him postcards for Christmas, a birthday card in June. He sent back short texts, always the same. "Thanks, Mom. Love you. Love you." 2 words that felt more like punctuation than feeling. When I fell ill with pneumonia one winter, I called him from the hospital. He didn't answer. Later he texted, "Can't leave the OR. Sending you money for a cab." I waited in the cold for that taxi, wrapped in my old wool coat, and told myself it was enough that love could sometimes look like a money transfer. But deep down, I knew something had shifted. I kept living my quiet life. Same house, same job until retirement. Same dreams folded neatly away in drawers I never opened. My friends tried to convince me to travel, to join a book club, to start dating again. "You've done enough for him," they said. "It's time to live for you." But I didn't know how. My life had been Drew. Without him, what was left? On weekends, I'd bake his favorite cookies, just in case he decided to visit. I'd keep the guest room tidy, sheets fresh, waiting for a knock that never came. The silence in that house grew heavier with every passing year. Sometimes I'd scroll through his social media, watching from afar as he smiled at charity galas beside Olivia and her glamorous parents. He looked happy, successful, complete, and yet there was always a faint ache in my chest, a question I couldn't silence. Did he ever miss me? I tried to be proud, to focus on the fact that my sacrifices had given him everything he wanted. But every time I saw his picture in another magazine article or hospital feature, a part of me wondered if, in giving him the world, I had erased myself from his. Still, I kept believing that someday he'd remember. Someday he'd call and say, "Thanks, Mom, for everything." That hope carried me through my 64th year, through birthdays spent alone, through quiet dinners for one. Then came the day I turned 65. And that was the day everything changed. It was my 65th birthday. I woke up early, made myself coffee, and baked a small chocolate cake, the kind I used to make when Drew was little. I even set 2 plates on the table out of habit. 40 years of being a mother doesn't disappear just because no one shows up for dinner. The day was quiet. Too quiet. By evening, I told myself he probably forgot or maybe he'd call later. That was the kind of lie mothers tell themselves to fill the silence. At 6:30, the doorbell rang. Through the frosted glass, I saw him, my son, standing there in a sleek gray suit, one hand in his pocket, Olivia beside him, immaculate as always. My heart fluttered. He remembered. "Mom," Drew said as I opened the door. His tone was polite, distant, like he was greeting a neighbor. "Happy birthday." They stepped in. The scent of Olivia's perfume filled the air, something floral and expensive that didn't belong in my modest little house. Her eyes swept across the room, landing on the thrift store curtains and the faded couch. "This place feels cozy," she said, smiling the way people do when they're pretending. I ignored the comment and smiled back. "Would you like some cake? I just made it." Drew glanced at his watch. "Sure, but we can't stay long. We're finalizing the paperwork for our new house." "A new house," I said. That's wonderful, Drew. He smiled, proud. Greenwich Estates, private pool, gym, security. Olivia's mom helped us find it. Olivia nodded. My mother has great connections. In Drew's line of work, it's important to be surrounded by the right people. It's all about image. Image. I didn't understand that world. I only understood effort, sacrifice, and love. Then Drew turned his phone toward me. Speaking of which, I just transferred $100,000 to Catherine, Olivia's mom, as a thank you for everything she's done for us. I froze. 100,000. He smiled. She's been amazing. Introductions, dinners, real estate agents, it's the least we could do. Something inside me twisted. I forced a nod. That's very generous of you. Olivia placed a white envelope on the table. And we got you something too, Maggie. I opened it slowly, expecting maybe a handwritten card, maybe concert tickets, something thoughtful. Inside was a $10 gift card. $10. I stared at it, waiting for the punchline that never came. Drew grinned. You can get something nice. Maybe update your look a little. Olivia added softly. Yes, something more modern. It would help when people meet you. Drew moves in important circles now. My chest tightened. Modern? You know, she said, tilting her head. Something that says you still take care of yourself. Ax. I looked at my reflection in the window, gray hair tied back, plain sweater, tired eyes. I didn't look modern. I looked like a woman who gave up everything so her son could shine. Drew took a sip of coffee and said, Mom, you should really think about selling this place. It's too big for you. Maybe move into one of those senior communities. You'd have company, people your age. People my age, I repeated. Olivia smiled sweetly. And there's this clinic my mother loves. They do little touch-ups, very subtle. You'd feel great. Honestly, it would make Drew proud to introduce you. Something in me shattered. All the noise around me faded, the ticking clock, the hum of the fridge, the clinking of coffee cups. I heard only the echo of their words. Company your age. Little touch-ups. Make Drew proud. I smiled mechanically. Thank you for the suggestions. I'll think about it. Drew checked his watch. We've got a dinner with the Bennetts. We should go. At the door, he turned back. Oh, and Mom, if you need anything, just call my assistant. My phone's been blowing up lately. And then they were gone. The house fell silent again. I looked at the cake, 2 untouched plates, 1 slice missing, and then at the $10 card lying on the table. $10. That was my worth, measured by the son I had raised, fed, and loved with every ounce of my being. My throat tightened. The tears came, slow at first, then uncontrollable. I cried until my chest ached. When I finally stopped, I stared at the card again. $10. After everything, I realized it wasn't just Drew who had forgotten my worth. I had too. All those years I made myself smaller, turning down promotions so I could pick him up from school, skipping vacations to pay for his textbooks, pretending I didn't mind when he stopped calling. I had mistaken sacrifice for love, silence for strength, and sitting there, surrounded by everything I had given up, I made myself a promise. Never again. Never again would I let anyone make me feel less than enough, not even my son. That night, something inside me woke up the part of me that had been buried under decades of good mother and selfless woman. The part that remembered who I was before the world convinced me I didn't matter. I whispered to the empty room, "No more crumbs. I deserve the feast." And you know what? That realization, it didn't feel bitter. It felt alive. Have you ever had a moment like that? When someone you love looks at you and you finally see the truth that you've been giving everything to someone who stopped seeing you long ago? If you have, pause right here. Tell me in the comments, how old were you when you first realized your worth? Or where in the world are you watching this from? If you haven't, maybe this story will be your reminder. And if you believe no mother, no parent, no human being deserves to be treated like a burden, hit the like button. Subscribe for more stories like this one, because sometimes hearing the right story at the right time can change the way you see yourself forever. Outside, the moonlight spilled across the quiet street. I stood by the window, watching my reflection fade into the glass. I didn't look broken anymore. I looked awake. That night, I didn't just turn 65. I turned a page. The morning after my 65th birthday, Sunlight crept through the curtains and painted the living room in soft gold, the same room where I had sat the night before, clutching a $10 gift card and crying like a child. But the woman who woke up that morning was not the same one who went to bed. Something in me had shifted. For decades, my life had revolved around other people's needs, my son's education, my coworkers' expectations, my friends' comfort. I had become a background character in my own story. But as I sipped my coffee that morning, I realized I didn't have to be. I turned on my laptop, something I rarely used except for paying bills, and logged into my bank account. The numbers glowed on the screen. $800,000. Savings I had quietly built over a lifetime. Promotions I never took. Vacations I never went on. Dresses I never bought. All for Drew. He never knew how much I had because I didn't want him to. I used to think hiding it protected him from guilt. Now I knew it had only protected him from gratitude. I stared at that number for a long time. It wasn't just money. It was proof that I had value, that I was capable, disciplined, and strong. It was everything I had ever been told I wasn't. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I felt powerful. That same day I made an appointment with a financial advisor downtown. Her name was Julia Roberts, not the actress, but she had the same confident smile. She looked to be in her 40s, sharp suit, steady eyes. "So, Mrs. Turner," she said as we sat across from each other, "what are your goals for this next chapter of life?" Her question caught me off guard. No one had ever asked me that before. My entire life had been about someone else's goals. "I want to make my money work for me," I said slowly. "Not for my son, not for anyone else, just me." Julia nodded approvingly. "Then let's get started." Over the next few weeks, I met with her regularly. We talked about investments, real estate, and long-term planning. I took notes like a student, reading every article she recommended. I watched webinars at night, joined online forums about personal finance. The more I learned, the hungrier I became. Knowledge became my oxygen. I reorganized my savings, diversified into bonds and stocks, and started tracking my expenses. Every decision made me feel like I was rebuilding the foundation of who I was. In between meetings, I began taking small steps toward rediscovering myself. I joined a walking club for retirees in my neighborhood. I signed up for a free online course about photography. I even went shopping for clothes that felt like me, no longer trying to look presentable by someone else's standards, just comfortable and alive in my own skin. I remember standing in front of the mirror one evening, wearing a simple blue dress, hair brushed, lipstick on. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. For the first time in years, I saw a woman who had survived, who had loved, who had finally decided to love herself back. A week later, Drew called. It was the first time since the birthday. I stared at the phone for a long moment before answering. "Mom," he said, his tone clipped. "Did you think about what I suggested? About selling the house?" "No," I replied simply. He hesitated. "Why not? It makes sense. That neighborhood isn't safe anymore. You could get a nice apartment in a senior community." "I'm not interested." He exhaled in frustration. "You never listen. I'm trying to help you." "Are you?" I asked quietly. "Because it sounds like you're trying to get rid of me." Silence, then a forced laugh. "Come on, Mom. Don't be dramatic." "I'm not being dramatic, Drew. I'm being clear." He sighed again, the sound of a man who didn't like being challenged. "Fine, do what you want, but don't say I didn't warn you." After we hung up, I felt shaken but also strangely proud. For once, I hadn't folded. I had said no, and the world hadn't fallen apart. In the following days, I poured my focus into learning, into growth. I attended seminars downtown, surrounded by people half my age. At first I felt out of place, but soon realized that wisdom doesn't expire. When I spoke, people listened. My age didn't make me invisible. It made me credible. Then something unexpected happened. I began to feel excited. Not for anyone else's success, but for my own. I started walking taller, sleeping better, eating better. I even hired a personal trainer at the local gym. His name was Marcus, a cheerful man in his 30s who treated me with genuine respect. "You've got fire, Maggie," he said one morning after I finished a set of weights. "Most people your age would have quit after 10 minutes. I smiled. Most people my age don't have something to prove. But I did. I wasn't proving anything to Drew anymore. I was proving it to myself. By the end of that month, I felt lighter not just in body but in spirit. I started noticing the small things again, the warmth of the sun on my porch, the laughter of children in the park, the smell of freshly brewed coffee. Life had texture again. One night, as I was reviewing my finances, I realized something astonishing. My investments had already started to grow. I had made more in interest that month than I used to make in a week at my old job. I laughed out loud, alone in my living room, the sound echoing off the walls like music. I poured myself a glass of wine and toasted to no one. "Here's to me," I said softly, "to the woman who finally woke up." But even as I smiled, a thought lingered in the back of my mind, Drew. Would he ever understand? Would he ever see me as more than an inconvenience? That question haunted me for a few days, but then I realized it didn't really matter. I wasn't living for his validation anymore. Have you ever reached that point? The moment when you finally stop waiting for someone else to see your worth and decide to see it yourself? It's terrifying and freeing all at once. If you've ever felt invisible, forgotten, or underestimated, this part of my story is for you, because I promise it's never too late to start over. Weeks passed, and every day I grew stronger. I began to wonder what else I could do. Maybe it was time for something bigger. A new home, perhaps. Not because someone told me to move, but because I wanted to. A place that reflected who I had become, not who I used to be. I didn't know it yet, but that thought, tiny and almost innocent, would soon set off a chain of events that no one, not even Drew, could have imagined. The idea began as a whisper in my mind and slowly grew louder until I couldn't ignore it anymore. I wanted a new home, not because Drew suggested it, not because someone thought I needed help, but because I was ready for something that reflected who I had become. I wanted a place that would remind me every morning that I had survived, that I had rebuilt my life from the ground up. Julia, my financial advisor, smiled when I told her. "Then let's find you something that feels like victory," she said. It sounded simple, but to me, it was revolutionary. For decades, every dollar I spent had been about someone else's needs. This time, it would be about mine. I started looking at listings online, scrolling through pages of homes across Illinois. I wanted something elegant, peaceful, with space for light to pour in. But nothing felt right. Everything I saw reminded me of my old life, the woman I used to be. One evening, Julia sent me a message. "I think I found something you might like," she wrote. I opened the link and froze. The property was breathtaking, a 3-bedroom colonial-style home in Greenwich Estates, Connecticut. White columns, wide windows, a garden that looked like it belonged in a magazine. My heart started racing. Greenwich Estates, the same gated community where Drew and Olivia had bought their new home. At first, I laughed out loud. It felt ridiculous, almost defiant. But the more I looked at the pictures, the less it felt like coincidence, and more like fate. The next day, I called Julia. "I want to see it," I said. We flew to Connecticut that weekend. When the realtor opened the front door, sunlight spilled into the foyer like liquid gold. The air smelled faintly of wood and jasmine. My heels echoed softly against the polished floors as I walked through each room. Everything about it felt open, alive, waiting. "This is the one," I whispered. Julia looked at me. "Are you sure? It's a big step." "I've been waiting my whole life to take a big step," I said. The asking price was $1.4 million. I offered $400,000 in cash and financed the rest with part of my investments. The realtor blinked, surprised by how decisive I was. "You don't want to think about it?" he asked. "I already have," I said. The offer was accepted within 2 days. When Julia called with the news, I sat in silence, trying to absorb it. For so long, I had been defined by what I couldn't do. Now, for the first time, I had done something just for me. The following weeks were a blur of packing boxes and signing papers. I didn't tell Drew or anyone else. This was mine, my secret victory. When I finally moved in, I stood in the doorway of my new home and took a deep breath. The house was still empty, the air filled with the quiet hum of possibility. I walked through each room barefoot, feeling the cool hardwood under my feet. In the kitchen, sunlight streamed across the marble counters. Upstairs, the master bedroom overlooked the gardens below. I wasn't just moving houses. I was moving into a new version of myself, I hired an interior designer, a young woman named Claire, who understood exactly what I wanted. No luxury for the sake of luxury, I told her. I want warmth, dignity, and space to breathe. She nodded, sketching ideas while listening more than she spoke. For weeks, I watched my home transform piece by piece. The living room filled with soft earth tones and framed art I chose myself. The library smelled of oak and new books. Even the backyard bloomed with fresh flowers, each petal a quiet declaration of independence. Every night I'd pour a glass of wine, sit on the patio, and look at the stars. For the first time in years, I wasn't looking at them for Drew. I was looking at them for me. It was strange, though, how peace can coexist with anticipation. I knew the day would come when Drew would find out. I wondered how he would react. Would he be proud, shocked, offended, maybe all three? That moment arrived sooner than expected. One afternoon, my phone rang. Drew's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated before answering. "Mom," he began, his tone brisk. "About your old house, I found a buyer for you." "A buyer?" I asked, confused. "Yes, a colleague from the hospital. He's looking for something in that area. I told him you were considering selling." "I see," I said slowly. "And how much is he offering?" $200,000. It's a fair price for the condition it's in." Fair price. My stomach twisted. That house was worth at least $450,000, even with the peeling paint and leaky roof. "I'm not interested," I said. "Mom, don't be stubborn. You don't need that space anymore. It's not safe for you to live alone." "Actually," I said calmly, "I've already taken care of my living situation." "What does that mean?" he asked, suspicion creeping into his voice. "I moved," I said simply. Silence. "You moved? Without telling me? Where?" "Greenwich Estates." For a moment there was only the sound of his breathing on the line. Then, incredulous, "That's impossible. You mean you rented something nearby?" "No," I said. "I bought a house, number 38. There was a pause so long I thought the call had dropped. Then he spoke, his voice sharp. "You bought a house there? That's the same neighborhood we live in. How could you afford that?" "Actually, screed. With my money," I replied, my tone even. "The money I earned and saved for decades while you thought I was barely scraping by." He sounded almost angry. "You never said you had that kind of money. And you never asked," I said. He exhaled hard. "This is unbelievable." "I suppose it is," I said softly. "Would you and Olivia like to come by for coffee tomorrow afternoon? You can see it for yourself." More silence. Then, tightly, "Fine, we'll come." When the call ended, I sat there for a long time, staring out the window at the manicured lawns and quiet streets of Greenwich Estates. The irony wasn't lost on me. The son who once told me I didn't belong in his world would now have to walk through my front door and see me standing firmly in it. That night I stood on my balcony, the cool air brushing against my face, and watched the faint lights from the neighboring houses. Somewhere out there, my son and his wife were probably trying to make sense of what had just happened. For the first time in a very long while, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel out of place. I felt ready. Tomorrow, they would see a different version of me. Not the mother who waited quietly on the sidelines, but the woman who finally claimed her place in the world. And I could hardly wait to see the look in their eyes. I woke up earlier than usual the next morning. The air was cool, the house quiet, the kind of silence that felt heavy with anticipation. Today, Drew and Olivia were coming. I had invited them for coffee, but we all knew this was not about coffee. I took my time getting ready. I chose a navy silk blouse, one that felt elegant without trying too hard, and a simple necklace that used to belong to my mother. My hair was neatly brushed, my makeup subtle. For the first time in years, I looked in the mirror and saw someone I was proud to be. At 3:45, I walked out to the balcony. The neighborhood was peaceful. Trimmed lawns, manicured trees, the kind of place where people waved politely but never really talked. I saw their car turn the corner right on time. When the gate opened and the sleek black sedan pulled up, my heart pounded but my expression stayed calm. I had waited a lifetime for this moment. They stepped out together. Drew in a gray suit, Olivia in a pale pink dress that probably cost more than my first car. Their eyes darted between the house and me as if trying to reconcile what they saw with what they believed. "Mom," Drew said, still standing by the car. His voice was hesitant, almost cautious. "Good afternoon, sweetheart," I replied evenly. "Olivia, welcome to my home." They followed me up the steps, Olivia's heels clicking against the stone walkway. Inside, the air smelled of coffee and lilies. The sunlight streamed across the marble floors and reflected off the glass railing of the staircase. "Wow," Olivia murmured, before she could stop herself. "This place is incredible." "Thank you," I said. "It suits me." Drew looked around, his brow furrowed. "I still don't understand how you could afford this." "With my money," I answered simply. "The same money that paid for your education, your medical school, your first apartment. You just never asked how much I had left." He blinked, speechless for a moment. "You had this much saved? Why didn't you ever tell me?" "Because it was never yours to know," I said gently. "And because I wanted to see what you'd become when you thought I had nothing left to give." The words hung in the air between us. Olivia shifted uncomfortably, glancing toward the doorway. "Would you like some coffee?" I asked, breaking the tension. They nodded, following me into the living room. I had set out a tray of pastries and fresh coffee in porcelain cups, the same brand of porcelain I knew Catherine Bennett collected. Olivia noticed immediately. "These are beautiful," she said softly. "They were a gift," I replied. "From myself." We sat. Drew's eyes roamed the room again, landing on the art pieces, the bookshelves, the view from the large bay window. Everything about the house challenged the image he'd held of me for years. "Mom," he began slowly, "this doesn't make sense. You always lived so modestly. You drove that old car forever, wore the same sweaters for decades. You could have lived like this all along?" "I could have," I said. "But I chose not to. I wanted you to have every chance I never did. I saved so you could stand where you stand today. I just never realized you'd use that height to look down on me." His face flushed. "That's not fair, isn't it?" I asked quietly. "Do you remember what you said on my birthday? That I was just a burden, that I should sell my home and move into a senior community, that I should change my face to make you proud." He looked down at his hands. "I didn't mean it like that, but you said it," I replied, my voice steady. "And you meant enough of it to hurt me." Olivia tried to intervene. "Maggie, we were just thinking about your comfort. It wasn't personal." "Not personal," I repeated, my eyes on her. "You told me I embarrassed you. You compared me to your mother, a woman who has never had to fight for anything. You both made me feel small in my own home." The silence stretched, heavy and uncomfortable. Drew shifted in his seat, his composure cracking. "I was under pressure," he said finally. "I'm trying to build a reputation, Mom. I can't afford to make mistakes. Olivia's family, they can open doors for me. And I suppose I was one of the doors you needed to close," I said. He looked at me then, really looked, as if seeing me for the first time. "I didn't realize how much I hurt you," he said quietly. "No," I answered. "You didn't. But now you do." He exhaled sharply, rubbing his temples. "This house, this whole thing, was it revenge?" "Revenge?" I repeated with a small smile. "No. It's a reminder. For me, not for you. A reminder that I am capable, that I deserve more than crumbs. And if it happens to make a few people uncomfortable, well, that's just a bonus." Olivia lowered her gaze. "We didn't mean to make you feel lesser." "You didn't make me feel lesser," I said. "You only reminded me of how much I had allowed myself to feel that way." The room fell quiet again. Drew stared at the floor. Olivia fidgeted with her purse strap. Outside, the wind rustled the trees. "Would you like a tour?" I asked finally, breaking the tension with a smile. "You might as well see where your mother lives now." They followed me through the house in silence. I showed them the living room, the kitchen, the garden. When we reached the study, Drew stopped in front of a framed diploma on the wall. It was his medical degree, the one I had paid for. "I had a copy made," I said. "I figured it belonged here too. After all, I helped earn it." He turned toward me, eyes wide, but there was no anger, only shame. When we returned to the foyer, I walked them to the door. "Thank you for coming," I said politely. "It was enlightening." Drew hesitated. "Mom," he said, "I'm sorry." "I know," I replied softly. but sorry doesn't erase years of silence. He nodded, defeated, then left with Olivia by his side. From the balcony, I watched their car disappear down the tree-lined street. For the first time, I didn't feel like the one left behind. I felt grounded, steady, whole. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the golden light filled my living room again. I poured myself another cup of coffee and stood by the window. I didn't know what would happen next, whether Drew would call again, or if this fragile truce would last. But I knew something had shifted inside him, the same way something had once shifted inside me. Sometimes, to be seen, you have to stop asking for permission. I smiled to myself, took a sip of coffee, and whispered, "This is only the beginning." A week passed after Drew and Olivia's visit. The house was quiet again, but the silence no longer felt heavy. It felt earned. For the first time in years, I was at peace with my choices. I spent my mornings tending to the small garden behind the house and my afternoons reading on the patio. I didn't expect to hear from Drew anytime soon, and truthfully, I didn't need to. Then one evening, as I was watering the roses, my phone rang. The screen flashed a name I hadn't expected to see, Olivia. I hesitated before answering. "Hello? Maggie, hi," she said softly. Her voice trembled in a way I had never heard before. "Do you have a moment?" "I'd like to talk. In person, if that's all right." "It's very bad." Her tone disarmed me. Gone was the polished arrogance. There was something human in it, something vulnerable. "Of course," I said. "Come by whenever you'd like." The next afternoon, Olivia arrived alone. No luxury car this time, no designer sunglasses. She looked tired, pale even, her hair pulled back in a simple bun. "Come in," I said gently. "Would you like some tea?" She nodded. When we sat down in the living room, she stared at her cup for a long moment before speaking. "Drew doesn't know I'm here," she said finally. "He would probably lose his mind if he did." I didn't respond. I waited. "I came because he's not doing well," she continued. "Ever since that day here, he hasn't been himself. He barely eats, barely sleeps. He just stares at old photos of you two. He keeps saying he doesn't understand how he became that person." Her voice cracked slightly. "Last night, I found him crying in his office. I've never seen him cry before." I felt something shift inside me, a strange mix of sorrow and relief. "He's realizing what he lost," I said quietly. Olivia nodded. "Yes, and I think he's scared it's too late." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the soft ticking of the clock on the mantel. Then Olivia took a deep breath. "There's something else," she said. "I'm pregnant." End quote. The words hung in the air like sunlight breaking through clouds. "Pregnant," I repeated, barely above a whisper. "Yes," she said, smiling faintly through tears. 3 months. We haven't told anyone yet, not even his parents. But I wanted you to know first." I felt tears welling in my eyes. "You wanted me to know?" She nodded. "Because this baby deserves to know who you are, and because I don't want to repeat the same mistakes." Her honesty stunned me. "What do you mean?" I asked. She looked down. "I treated you terribly, Maggie. I judged you, dismissed you, all because I was raised to believe money and status were what mattered. My mother drilled that into me, but now I see how wrong she was. You're the kind of woman I want my child to look up to." I didn't know what to say. The woman sitting across from me wasn't the cold, condescending Olivia I had known. This was someone changed, softened by truth, by humility, by love. She continued, "Drew doesn't know how to fix things. He wants to talk to you, but he doesn't know where to start." I took a sip of tea, letting her words sink in. The part of me that had longed for my son's affection wanted to forgive instantly. But another part, the wiser part, knew wounds like ours didn't heal overnight. "I'll meet him," I said finally. "But not here, somewhere neutral." Olivia exhaled in relief. "Thank you, I'll tell him." She hesitated before standing. "Maggie, one more thing." "Yes?" "When this baby comes, I want you to be part of its life. You don't have to answer now. Just think about it." I smiled faintly. "I'll think about it." After she left, I sat alone for a long time, staring out the window at the garden. The evening sun turned the flowers golden, and I felt a warmth spread through me that I hadn't felt in years. A grandchild. My son's child. A new generation. That night, I couldn't sleep. Memories kept flooding back. Drew as a little boy chasing fireflies, his laughter echoing through the backyard, the way he used to hold my hand when we crossed the street. Somewhere along the way, that little boy had gotten lost in the man he became. And maybe, just maybe, this baby could help both of us find our way back. The next morning, I called Olivia. "Tell Drew I'll meet him," I said, "at that cafe downtown, the one near the old park." When I arrived at the cafe later that week, Drew was already there, sitting in the corner by the window. He looked older somehow, his face pale, his eyes tired. "Mom," he said, standing as I approached. His voice trembled. "Thank you for coming." We sat in silence for a few moments. I could feel his eyes on me, but I kept mine on the coffee cup between my hands. "You look well," he said finally. "I am," I replied. "Better than I've been in years." He nodded. "You look happy." "I am that too." He swallowed hard. "I don't even know where to start." "Then start anywhere," I said gently. He took a deep breath. "I was cruel to you. I said things I can't take back. I don't know what happened to me, Mom. Somewhere along the way, I started believing I was better than you. And I wasn't. I never was." Tears filled his eyes. "You gave me everything, and I made you feel like you were nothing." For a moment, I couldn't speak. I had imagined this conversation so many times, rehearsed every possible response. But now that it was happening, all I felt was exhaustion and a strange, tender ache. "You hurt me," I said softly, "more than I can explain. But I also let you. I made myself small so you could feel tall." He wiped his eyes. "Can you forgive me?" "I don't know," I said truthfully. "Forgiveness isn't a switch, Drew. It's a road. And I'm willing to walk it, but it'll take time." He nodded, eyes glistening. "That's all I can ask." We sat quietly after that, both staring out the window as rain began to fall. For the first time in years, there was no anger between us, only an unspoken understanding that we were both broken people trying to heal. "I heard about the baby," I said finally. His head snapped up. "Olivia told you?" "She did. Congratulations." He smiled faintly. "I didn't think she'd have the courage to tell you." "She did," I said, "and I'm proud of her for it." He reached across the table, his hand trembling slightly. "I want you in this child's life, Mom. I want to make things right." I looked at his hand for a long moment, remembering the countless times I had held it when he was small. Then, slowly, I placed mine over his. "Let's take it one step at a time," I said. He nodded. "I can do that." We talked for another hour, about small things mostly, the weather, his work, my garden. But beneath every word was something deeper, a fragile thread reconnecting what had once been torn apart. When we finally stood to leave, he hugged me tightly. It wasn't the polite, distant embrace I had come to expect. It was real, warm, sincere. As I walked home through the drizzle, my heart felt lighter. The rain soaked my hair, but I didn't care. Something new had begun, something uncertain, but full of promise. And as I stepped through the door of my house, I couldn't help but whisper to myself, "Maybe this time, we'll get it right." The weeks after that meeting with Drew passed quietly but not without thought. We spoke occasionally, mostly through short phone calls that began awkwardly and ended with small, hesitant laughter. Every conversation felt like a test of balance, two people learning to talk again without reopening old wounds. Olivia called too, her tone gentler now. She'd ask about my garden, about the weather, or sometimes just to say hello. It was strange at first, how normal it began to feel. The walls between us weren't gone, but they were no longer insurmountable. One afternoon she invited me to join her for a doctor's appointment. "Drew has a conference that day," she said, "and I'd like some company." I hesitated. The idea of walking into a space so personal made me nervous, but something inside whispered that this was important. At the clinic, Olivia waited for me in the lobby, her hands resting protectively over her growing belly. She looked different, softer somehow, her sharp edges replaced with something calmer. During the ultrasound, the doctor smiled and turned the monitor toward us. "Would you like to hear the heartbeat?" Olivia nodded, her eyes glistening. The rhythmic sound filled the room, steady and strong. I felt tears prick my eyes. That sound, it wasn't just life, it was a second chance. When we left the office, Olivia stopped on the sidewalk and took my hand. "Thank you for being here," she said. "I was so scared of facing this alone." "You're not alone," I said, and for the first time, I meant it completely. From then on, things began to change in small but meaningful ways. Drew called more often, not out of obligation but with genuine interest. He'd ask how I was sleeping, if I needed anything, or if I wanted to join them for dinner. I declined the first few times, afraid of falling back into old habits, but eventually I agreed. The first dinner together was cautious. The house was filled with the warm smell of roast chicken, and Olivia had set the table beautifully. Drew looked nervous, glancing at me as though expecting disapproval. "This is lovely," I said. "You both did a wonderful job." He smiled, relief washing over his face. We wanted it to feel special. As we ate, the conversation flowed more easily than I had expected. We talked about work, about books, about Olivia's cravings for ice cream in the middle of the night. Every so often, Drew would glance at her belly with a look of awe that softened his entire face. At one point, Olivia reached across the table and touched my hand. "Would you like to come with me next week? I'm starting to plan the nursery." I nodded. "I'd love that." Those small invitations became the thread that stitched our relationship back together. We painted walls, folded tiny clothes, argued over wallpaper, and laughed until our cheeks hurt. There were still moments of tension. Of course, years of pain don't disappear overnight, but they were no longer sharp. They were human. One afternoon, as I was helping Olivia organize baby gifts, she turned to me and said, "You know, Drew's been different lately. Calmer. Happier." I smiled. "Maybe he finally learned that peace doesn't come from pretending to be perfect." She laughed softly. "Or maybe it's from finally having his mother back." Her words caught me off guard. For so long, I had felt like a shadow in my own family's life. Hearing that made something inside me settle, like a puzzle piece finally clicking into place. When Olivia reached her 7th month, Drew invited me over one Sunday morning. "We have something to tell you," he said over the phone. When I arrived, they were sitting on the couch, hands intertwined. Olivia's face glowed. Drew looked almost shy. "We've been thinking about names," he began. "If it's a girl, we'd like to name her Elena." My breath caught. "Elena?" He nodded. "After you." I sat there, speechless. My throat tightened. "Only if you're comfortable with it," Olivia added quickly. "We just thought, you've given this family so much. We want our daughter to carry that strength with her." "Ain't knowed." I blinked back tears. "I'd be honored," I whispered. For a long time, we sat there in silence, all three of us caught in the quiet gravity of the moment. It wasn't just about a name, it was about acknowledgement, about finally being seen. The following weeks were filled with small joys, baby showers, doctor visits, and long walks through the park where Drew would talk about his fears of fatherhood. "I'm terrified of messing it up," he admitted once. I smiled. "That means you're already on the right track." Sometimes, I'd catch him studying me with a look I couldn't quite read, half gratitude, half regret. I didn't push him to explain. Some things didn't need words. As Olivia's due date approached, the air seemed to hum with both excitement and anxiety. Every phone call made my heart race a little. I kept a packed bag by the door, just in case. Then, one evening, my phone rang again. It was Olivia, but this time, her voice wasn't calm. "Maggie," she gasped. "I think something's wrong. The contractions started early. Drew's out of town for a conference. I'm scared." "I'm on my way," I said before she could say another word. I grabbed my keys and coat, my heart pounding as I drove through the dark, rain-slicked streets. The storm outside mirrored the rush of fear and adrenaline inside me. When I reached their house, Olivia was pale, trembling, her breathing shallow. "It's too early," she whispered. "Don't worry," I said, taking her hand. "You're not alone." I helped her into the car and drove toward the hospital. The windshield wipers thudded in rhythm with my heartbeat. Between contractions, she gripped my hand so tightly I could feel her fear. "It's going to be all right," I said, trying to sound steady even as my voice shook. "You're strong. And that baby, she's stronger than you know." At the hospital, nurses rushed to her side. The doctor quickly examined her and smiled reassuringly. "False labor," he said. "Everything looks fine. Just a scare. To Ace. Olivia exhaled, tears of relief spilling down her cheeks. I found myself crying too, the release of tension too great to contain. When Drew arrived hours later, soaked from the rain and wild-eyed with worry, he froze at the sight of us. Olivia resting, me sitting beside her, holding her hand. "She's all right," I said softly. "So is the baby." He ran a hand through his hair, then looked at me with something that resembled awe. "You came." "Of course I did," I said. "That's what family does." He nodded, his eyes glistening. "Thank you, Mom." It had been so long since I'd heard that word said with real warmth that for a moment I couldn't speak. I just smiled and patted his arm. That night, as I drove home under a clearing sky, the rain had stopped and the moon glowed pale and bright above the city. I thought about how life had come full circle, how years of hurt had led to this fragile, imperfect peace. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end of our story. Something was still waiting on the horizon. And soon, it would arrive in the form of a tiny heartbeat that would change everything once more. The months after the hospital scare passed like pages turning in a story I wasn't sure I deserved but finally got to live. Olivia's pregnancy grew smoothly, and our lives began to settle into a rhythm that felt peaceful. Drew called every few days just to check in, and when he couldn't visit, he'd send photos of Olivia's growing belly or updates about the nursery they had finished together. It felt strange, in the best possible way, to be included again not as an afterthought, but as part of the family. When Olivia went into labor for real this time, it was a calm Sunday morning in late spring. Drew called me on the way to the hospital, his voice trembling with excitement. "Mom, it's happening," he said. "She's really coming." "I'm on my way," I told him. By the time I arrived, the sun was already setting behind the hospital. Drew met me in the hallway, exhausted but beaming. "She's here," he said, eyes shining. "Mom, she's perfect." He led me to the room where Olivia lay resting, her face flushed but radiant. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in pink. My breath caught when I saw her. The baby was small and perfect, her little hands curled into fists, her breathing soft and steady. "Would you like to hold her?" Olivia asked. I nodded, unable to speak. When she placed the baby in my arms, the world seemed to stop. The room, the lights, even the sound of the monitors faded away. There was only her, this new life, warm and fragile, looking up at me with eyes so familiar they made my chest ache. "Hello, little one," I whispered. "I'm your grandma." Drew smiled. "Mom," he said quietly. We named her Elena. Tears spilled down my cheeks before I could stop them. I looked at my son, standing beside his wife, his hand resting protectively on her shoulder. For the first time in years, I saw him not as the man who had hurt me, but as the boy I had raised, the boy who used to fall asleep in my lap, who once promised to buy me a telescope so I could see the stars. And now, he had given me a new star to look after. The following days were a blur of visits, diaper changes, and sleepless nights filled with laughter instead of tears. Olivia insisted I stay with them for the first week. Every morning, I'd wake to the sound of baby Elena's cries, followed by Drew's tired but happy voice, humming lullabies off-key. One night, as I sat rocking the baby while Olivia rested, Drew came into the nursery. He stood there for a while, watching me in silence. "She likes you," he said finally. "She doesn't know me yet," I replied softly. "She knows enough," he said. "She stops crying when you hold her." I smiled. "Maybe she just feels safe." He sat beside me, his shoulders slumped from exhaustion. "Mom," he said after a long pause, "thank you for being here. For everything. I don't think I ever told you that enough." I looked at him, this man who had once broken my heart and was now trying to mend it, one honest word at a time. "You just did," I said. We sat there for a while, listening to the soft rhythm of Elena's breathing, and for the first time, the silence between us wasn't heavy. It was full of peace, of forgiveness, of love. Over the next few months, life found a new balance. I spent time between my home and theirs, helping when they needed me but keeping enough distance to let them grow as a family. I watched Drew transform into a gentle, attentive father. I watched Olivia become the kind of mother who led with warmth rather than appearances. Even Catherine, Olivia's once proud and distant mother, began to change. When her husband's business failed, She called me not for sympathy, but for advice. "You seem to have figured out how to live without pretending," she admitted during one of our afternoon teas. "Maybe it's time I learned too." It was strange, sitting across from a woman who had once looked down on me, now humbled by life and open to friendship. We weren't close, not exactly, but there was respect where there had once been resentment. The day baby Elena turned 1, Drew and Olivia hosted a small family gathering in their backyard. The sun was warm, the air filled with the smell of grilled food and laughter. Friends and neighbors came by to celebrate, and for the first time, I didn't feel out of place. When everyone sang happy birthday, I looked around the table at Drew, Olivia, even Catherine, and felt something deep inside me settle. This was my family, imperfect but real, stitched back together with care and hard lessons. Later that evening, after the guests had left, Drew handed me a small box wrapped in silver paper. "Open it," he said. Inside was a delicate bracelet engraved on the inside with tiny words, "To the woman who taught me the true value of things." I couldn't stop the tears this time. "It's beautiful," I whispered. "It's not expensive," Drew said quickly, almost embarrassed. "But it means everything," I interrupted, smiling. He nodded, his eyes wet. "I love you, Mom." I reached out and touched his cheek, the way I used to when he was little. "I know," I said, "and I love you too." That night, as I drove home, I thought about how far we had come from a $10 gift card to this, from humiliation to healing, from silence to laughter. Life doesn't give you do-overs, but it does offer second chances if you're brave enough to take them. When I got home, I walked to the patio and looked up at the night sky. The stars shimmered faintly above the quiet streets of Greenwich Estates. Somewhere inside the house next door, my son and granddaughter were sleeping, safe and loved, and I finally felt whole. I thought of every woman, every mother who had ever given everything and received so little in return, every person who had been made to feel small for loving too deeply or sacrificing too much. This story wasn't just mine, it was theirs too. If you've ever been overlooked, if you've ever felt invisible to the people you love most, I hope you remember my story. I hope you find the courage to stand tall, to demand respect, and to love yourself enough to never settle for less again. And if this story touched your heart even a little, do something for me like this video. Leave a comment telling me where you're watching from, or subscribe so you don't miss the next story. Because sometimes, the right story at the right time can remind us that it's never too late to start over. This isn't just the end of my story, it's the beginning of yours.